analysts get the drift. They get the drift. They write reports critical, they go nowhere. They write a report that supports the White House. All of a sudden they're giving briefings at the White House. Come on. Everybody gets the drift.
Dick Cheney's intelligence network soon included a secretive group at the Pentagon, which worked closely with the Vice President. It was known as the OSP, the Office of Special Plans.
Their starting point was not, let's try to figure out what was going on, but let's see what kind of information we can come up with to justify the policy line that we wish to pursue.
Greg Thielman was an intelligence specialist with the U.S. State Department who watched the emergence of the OSP. It soon became clear to him what its mission was and who was behind it.
Cheney was the driving force behind an orchestrated presentation to the American public of a different version of reality than at least the reality that we saw.
In the intelligence business, that's called cherry picking, selecting individual morsels of information that support a specific point of view, and stovepiping, sending them without analysis right to the White House to be inserted into the president's script.
Facing clear evidence of peril, we cannot wait for the final proof, the smoking gun.
When I heard those speeches and read the transcripts, I recognized many of the anecdotes, many of the examples from things we were being given.
Former Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Karen Kwiatkowski was assigned to the Pentagon, working with Cheney's OSP staff.
Having seen the intelligence, I knew that this was a manipulation of information. It was cherry-picked information, out-of-context information, in many cases information presented as confirmed when in fact it had not been ever confirmed by the intelligence community.
Much of that information came from a source named Ahmed Shalabi, perhaps the best-known Iraqi expatriate. His organization got over $300,000 a month to provide intelligence ostensibly from inside Iraq.
Well, come on, you're going to pay somebody $345,000 a month. You're going to get your money's worth, right? He wants to keep the checks coming. He's going to keep telling you things.
How are you, sir? Fine. Pleasure to meet you. Thank you. How are you?
Chalabi, a convicted bank swindler who hadn't lived in Iraq for years, hoped to become the Iraqi president when Saddam was ousted. His reports predicted American troops would be greeted as liberators and confirmed weapons of mass destruction.
This is what allowed Iraqi National Congress, Chalabi, reports that have proven to be either completely fabricated or completely wrong, to get to the President of the United States without the proper kind of labels.
And as they ordered hundreds of thousands of American forces to the Persian Gulf, the statements from White House officials were unanimous. Saddam Hussein was a nuclear threat.
We cannot wait for the final proof, the smoking gun that could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
Within a 2-week, 3-week period, every senior official began to talk about mushroom clouds. How many believed it? I think most of them did.
Whether George W. Bush truly believed it or not, that threat was the urgent message in his State of the Union address in January 2003. Not only had Saddam used WMD in the past, but he was actively pursuing a nuclear future.
The International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed in the 1990s that Saddam Hussein had an advanced nuclear weapons development program. The State of the Union.
Watching the speech on television was a man who knew the truth about Saddam's nuclear program. Ahmad Kaddouri now lives north of Toronto, but for years he was one of Iraq's top nuclear scientists.
I would estimate we were about 15 to 20% in 1991 of where we should have been to declare that we have a nuclear bomb.
But that never happened, according to Kaddouri, because of this.
The nuclear weapon program in Iraq stopped on the first night of the bombing of the Gulf War in 1991.
That first night, coalition aircraft launched 1,000 bombing runs in Iraq. When they were finished, Saddam's dream of an atomic bomb was too.
That's because they actually bombed the nuclear research center at the site where we did our research. Control, the manufacturing, the processing, that was bombed. Therefore, the whole program stopped.
Ahmad Kaduri insists none of it was ever rebuilt. But 12 years later, he heard George W. Bush use the long-defunct nuclear program as an excuse to attack Iraq again.
Saddam Hussein has gone to elaborate lengths to build and keep weapons of mass destruction.
And watching that State of the Union address in 2003 was someone else with a personal stake in George Bush's speech. Joe Wilson is a former U.S. ambassador in Africa, the last American diplomat to officially meet with Saddam Hussein. When the administration got a tip that Saddam had been trying to buy uranium from the African nation of Niger, the CIA dispatched Wilson to check it out.
And in essence, your conclusion was what?
Well, my conclusion was it could not have taken place. Could not have taken place, did not take place.
Joe Wilson told the Central Intelligence Agency that the rumor linking African uranium and Saddam Hussein was false. Then he heard George W. Bush say this.
The British government has learned that Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa.
It was a message calculated to sell a war. Saddam had to be stopped before he got a nuclear bomb.
When you hear the president in that State of the Union address, what possible explanation?
Well, then it became clear to me that there had been a deliberate attempt on the part of some members of the government to deceive the U.S. Congress and deceive the American people, and indeed, given the fact that the State of the Union address is broadcast around the world, deceive the world as to the nature of the threat posed by Saddam's nuclear programs.
Wilson says he tried to convince the administration to retract the statement. Then he went public himself with this op-ed article in the New York Times. He says it was no coincidence that the next week, columnist Robert Novak reported what senior administration officials had told him, that Joe Wilson's wife was an agent for the CIA.
How beyond the pale is it for someone in the administration to reveal to a journalist like Bob Novak the identity of an undercover CIA?
It's a betrayal of national security. It is essentially the betrayal of our country. It is a treasonous act. It may never be prosecuted as such, but it is an act of betrayal of the country.
Wilson believes that leak originated at a meeting in the White House, at the office of the Vice President. He says it was revenge against him by an administration interested not in the truth, but in sending a signal to others who might disagree about the war.
The idea was to tell other analysts that if you do to us what Wilson has done to us, we'll do to you what we've just done to Wilson's wife.
You're taking cheap little pathetic shots. Just giving his record. To tell you what the truth is.
After the break, how the Bush administration altered the way the media presented the war, dividing America and the world.
You know what I was doing?
Shut up.
Please don't tell me to shut up.
In the days, weeks, and months following 9/11, most of George W. Bush's own country and much of the Western world was united behind him.
Every nation in every region now has a decision to make. Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
But since this moment, Bush has accomplished what was then almost unthinkable. He's turned the fight against terror into a partisan issue, and he started with what may have been the most misleading statement of all.
Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
Call you're either with us or with the terrorists rhetoric, hyperbole, or an outright lie. It fundamentally misrepresented the reality of confronting a crucially complex situation. Now, there could be no dissent. To question the president during this war would be tantamount to treason.
I happen to believe in free speech. I mean, I made my living on it. And now I find myself with a government that, seems to feel that free speech is kind of a quaint idea. But not when we're at war.
Now, Donnie.
American television icon Phil Donahue soon found himself a lonely anti-war voice in the pro-administration world of cable TV.